Hello and welcome everyone to this new video in our series about front-end development. In this video, we will be talking more about cascading style sheets. So we'll be using more properties and advanced selectors. In the previous video, we've already seen the tag selectors, the class name selector, which is started by a dot, and the ID selector, which starts by a hash. We have also seen how to target multiple elements using a comma. So for example, here we are targeting every tag with a header 1 or header 2. Another type of selector is the attribute selector. An example of this selector is shown here, where we have a tag name, namely the anchor, and between this indexing brackets here, we have a property called href, and we are giving it a value. Using this selector, every anchor with an href property equal to the value which we put here will be selected and styled, of course, with the following style if you have a style here, using a curly brackets. Another type of selectors is the pseudo classes. These classes can be used to modify the behavior of elements. For example, when we hover the mouse over the element, or when the element is focused, when a link, for example, or an anchor is visited, or the style of the unvisited link. The syntax of the pseudo class, we have a selector followed by a colon and then the pseudo class, as you can see here in these examples. There is also these two kinds of selector here, before and after, and as you can see, we have this double colon here, and I will show these two selectors and how we use them to add even content to our element. Every element in the HTML document has these two properties, before and after, and using the before, we can add content before the element, or using the after, we can add elements after it. We have also this placeholder selector, which help us to select the placeholder text inside an input. We will also be doing an example using that. Then we will see how we can combine selectors using combining operators. So for example, here we have the plus operator, and this operator will help us to select the next sibling. So if we wrote, for example, div plus p, that means here we are targeting every p element, so the second element, which is preceded by the div. Then we have the subsequent sibling selector, which is this tilde here. An example for that, div tilde p. This will apply the following style to any p tag, which is following a div, even if it's not following it directly. So even if we have a div, then maybe header 1, then p, this will be applied to the p. Similarly here for the child, we have a direct child and any child. This one is the larger than operator is used, and here is just a space. So here we have one single space between the div and the p, and in these two the style will be applied to the second element here. So in post it's the p if it's inside a div tag. The only difference is that here the p should be directly inside the div tag. Here it could be inside another tag which is surrounded by a div. So not necessarily a direct child. We will also see how we will use this has selector, and we will be using an example similar to this here. So in this example here, the following style will be applied to any div where the condition inside this parenthesis is true. So in this example, any div element which has a child, so here we have the child selector. So any div which has an input tag inside it, and this input tag should be focused. In this video, we'll also be using the display property, and we will be using a flexbox. So we'll be putting this property to the value flex, and this will allow us to make layouts much easier than the block and inline, which we've shown in the previous video. So a flexbox will allow us to add element either in a row or in a column, and you will see that using these two combinations, you will be able to do any layout which you see on the web. Another property which we will be using in this video is the outline property, and this property is used to control an outlining border around any element. And this is the example which we will be doing in this video. We will be designing a header which is inspired by Amazon Prime, and we will design this header to give the user the best experience expected. So let's jump to the code. So as you can see, I already prepared a folder for our website. I called it video 6, and inside this folder we have two other folders, the folder CSS, which contain our style sheet, and an images folder which contain icons, and the nature folder which has some images to use in the later tutorials. Then our HTML document, which is called evaluate. Let's go through it. So in this tutorial, we are supposed to make a website for evaluating movies. So let me show this side by side with the Amazon website. So in this first tutorial, we'll be only doing this upper header here. So let's focus on that. You can see here in our HTML page. So we start by document type, then HTML tag. In the header, we have the title. So we called it movie evaluation. Then we have the character set and viewport. then a link to our style sheet. We will go through this style sheet in a second, and then the body. And the body for now contain only a header tag and some paragraphs so that we can scroll and see the scroll behavior of our page. So let's not focus on those. And the header tag, you can think of it as a div. So it's rendered in a similar way. There is nothing special about it in the rendering. However, this tag is used by the web browsers and the search engines to understand your document. So I decided to divide this header here into 3 parts. So a left part, then middle part, and a right part. So the left part will contain a logo and a button, which would be similar to these two buttons here. The logo button contains an image and just a text. I will try to make a logo which looks good using this image and text. And then we have the location button, which will contain an image like this one here, and then 2 paragraphs on top of each other. So those are the 2 paragraphs, and this is the image here. Then we have the middle part, which is this part here. And for that, I will have a select, which trying to emulate this select here. I already added some categories here for the movies. And then we have the input text, which is similar to this area here. And then the search button, which is similar to this one here. Then we have the right part, where we have the language button. For the language button, we will have an image and a label. So similar to this here. And then instead of having 2 buttons here, I decided to have only one. That would be enough for our purpose here, which is learning HTML and CSS. So this button, I called it user button. It will contain 2 lines, hello and user options. You can also use P here, paragraph, if you like, but I decided to use div here. And then we have this button here, which should be similar to this one, to the shopping cart. Also, this button will contain an image and a text. And this text, as you can see here, it have a number only 4, which will be displayed similar to this 0 here. And it's supposed to show maybe the movies which you already have evaluated, for example. So that's it about the HTML. The only thing which you need to know is that for each element, as you can see, I have added a class. So for example, here for the right part, we start by the div right part, then the button, language image, and so on. Language label. Similarly for the user, so user button. Yeah, for these 2 divs, we did not add any class. We will style them in a different way because we want to practice selectors. And also for some tags, I already added an ID because we also want to practice the ID selector. You can see similarly for the middle part, we have a category class here and a category ID. And also for the input, search text and search button and search image. Here for the location, we have location button, location outer div, and location image. So those are the classes here. And also for the left part, and of course for the header. We will be using some images. As you can see here, the star, location, film category, search, the word image here, and a film image. Now let's go to the style sheet. And I also prepared our style sheet, which we linked here. It's called headers.css. And inside this style sheet, I already added the classes which we have. So starting from the header, left part, and every button and image there, then to the middle part, and so on, the right part. And also an ID selector here for the element with the ID num, which is the number of movies which we evaluated, which is this ID here. And as you can see, the styles are all empty for now. We will be filling them during the video. So let's open it in a browser using the live server. And this is how it would look like. You will have very big images. This is the input search. So this is the selector and then the input, and you can see also some of the buttons. And the first thing you will notice that the images is too large. So let's start by making those images smaller before we do anything else. So now you can see all the contents. So here we have our left part, our middle part, and then our right part. And you can see that since we put those in a div, so they are displayed as block, and instead of being on one row, they are displayed on top of each other like a column. So let's arrange them in a row using a flexbox. And to do that, we will target our header. So this header is surrounding all these 3 divs, and then here if we put the display property to be flex and we save, you can see now that they are on a row. That's because the default display of the flexbox is a row. We can make them again in top of each other by using a flex direction. So if we put the flex direction to column, for example, and we save, we are back to a column view. Let me keep this here and put it to a row so that you remember that you have this property flex direction. And now we can see all our content here. Let's start by styling them from the left part here, from the logo. Actually, before doing that, we want to change the color of the body, so we will have this dark color here. And for that, I will be targeting the body element. So let me write body here. This is a tag selector, as you know. And I will be putting the background property to a color which is similar to the one from the website. And let's save. And you can see now we have this dark color here. However, the background of the button is not changed. We can target it also here using this comma and then writing button. And since now we cannot see the text, let me change the text anyway to white. And let's start by the logo button, which is inside the left part. And for this button, let us remove the borders using border none. And then I want to change the color of this label. And to change the color of the text, we go to the span, to the logo span, and you can see we already have a nice color here. And let's make the font also smaller, so using font size. Finally, I want to push this text a little bit, so we can put the left property to minus. As you can see, this is not affecting the label here, and that's because it's inside this logo button. So we need to also change the display property of the button to be flexbox. And from the top side, maybe we put it to 22 pixels. And we need to put the position to relative. Let me change those number a little bit. So this is the position I wanted for this. Now notice that these two buttons, the location and the logo button, are on top of each other. And for that, we can also change the display property here to flex. And since the default direction is row, when we save, they will appear beside each other, as you can see here. Now let's style the location button. And it's similar to the logo. I will want to remove the border, and let's also put the display to flex. And you can see now we still have the image here. You cannot see the image perfectly. Let me change the background color for this image. So this is the location image. If we put the background color to be white, now you can see the image. So now we have the image and the two paragraphs are on top of each other. Remember that those are inside this outer div here. So we need to go to this outer div and put the display property to flex. And you can see now we have the button here and then the paragraph on top of each other, because as you know, for the paragraph, the default display is block. So if we change the paragraphs, for example, to span, you can see that they appear beside each other because the default display of the span is inline block. And now if we want them to appear on top of each other, we need to target this inner div. So remember, we have the outer div, which is now a flex row mode. And then in this inner div, we want to have a flex column. So let's go to the inner div and put the display mode to flex and the flex direction to column and save. Let me make this bigger. So first we have a div here with flex direction row. So that includes this image and the div surrounding these two spans. And then the div surrounding these two spans have a flex direction, which is a column, and that's why they appear on top of each other. And now you know how you can combine these flex boxes so that you have the layout that you want. Let me make this smaller now. And let's make the background of the image here is more round. And for that, we use the radius property of the border applied to the image. And let's put it to 8 pixels and put the image width to 16. So we want to make it smaller. And now it appears to have more height. So let's target also the height here and put it to 16 pixels. Now it looks round. And now if you compare it here, we have the image at the middle almost. Try to make our image here also in the middle. And for that, we want to put the alignment to center, and maybe we put that starting from the header here. So because we want everything here to be centered, so let's use the align items center and save. And then let's put it also in the outer div. So we have everything here centered and our image also here is centered. Then now let's make the font of these two spans smaller. So those, we call them location first B and location second B. So now they are spans, but I will keep the name as it is for now. So for this upper one, I will put the font size to 10 and for the lower one, 12. So it will be a little bit larger. So now let's move to the middle part here, and I want it to be similar to this one. So notice that here when I make the web page smaller, that this input will become smaller till a certain point, and then we will have here the horizontal scroll bar, and when you make it larger, it will take up more space here. You can see that in our case, there is no effect like this, and let's change that using the flex property. So let's go to the middle part, and in this middle part, we have our div surrounding this area here, and this middle part is already inside our header, and our header is a flex box, so we can add a property here called the flex and put it to 1 and save. And now you can see that the right part is pushed to the right, and that's because our middle part here is taking all the empty space. To see that, let me change the background color for now, put it maybe to red. So you can see that the middle part is taking the whole area here. And now if we are making our page smaller, it will become smaller and it will be bigger when we stretch the page. Okay, now we need to extend this effect to the elements inside this div. So our middle part is a div. Then we can also put the display to flex. And now let's save. It only affected now the height of these elements here. And now each element inside this div can have a flex property. And I will go to the input. So we called it search text, and I will put this flex property to 1. And that means when you have extra space, stretch by 1. And you can see now we have a similar effect to what we have seen in the Prime website. You can think of this flex property here as deciding how much we want to stretch the element. So each element which does not have this property, it will not stretch. Let's see this by changing the style of this button here. So in this button, let me first put the background color to aqua, so then you can see this button. And let me also put the flex to a value of 1 and save. And now you can see that the button is as large as the input text, and that because we've put the flex in both of them to the same value. So if I want both to stretch, but maybe I want the text box to stretch more, then I can put a value which is larger here, maybe 10, and now the input will be stretched 10 times more than the button. And let me save. So you can see now the button is stretched a little bit, but the input stretched more. And this is the principle here. So if you want to stretch also the select element, we can again add the flex here. And let's put it to 2, for example. And now you can see it's also stretched more than the button, and so on. And this is how you can make your layout flexible, change by changing the size of the page. So for now, I will remove this 2 here, and in the text box, put it back to 1. And let me remove this style here and save. Notice also that when we change the display to flex in our middle part, that the height here is stretched. So let's put the height of the middle part to 24. So we'll have thinner controls here. Now let's change this select, the properties of the select here. So let's put the background to light gray and the color to black. And I want this border here to be, let me make this bigger. You can see that we have a border here, and these edges are not round, while here we have round edges. So let's target these two properties using the border width and radius. So now you can see that the border is gone, and we have here from the top left and bottom left, we have these round edges, while in these two edges here, we added 0, 0. So this border radius, when we use 4 numbers, so we'll be starting from this corner to this corner and so on, and then going clockwise. Maybe you also noticed the red color here, and that's because we put our middle part background color to red. So let's remove that. Then let's make the font of this select to 10. And now for this text here, we can see that we have rounded corners here, but not much rounded. And same from this side. However, here it's not rounded. So let's go to the search text and put the border radius to 0 and save. You can see now it's not rounded anymore, but we have this border which we don't want. So let's put the border to none and save. Notice that here we have a small border between the button and the text box, and it has a color of gray. So let's add it using the border left. So we have a border none, and then we have a border left. So that means only the border left will be applied, and that would be solid 1 pixel and with a gray color. Let me save now. You can see border added here. Now let's also change the style of this button here, the search button, and I will target the background color. I will have this color here, and the border I will put it to 0, and I will make these two edges here round. So let's save. And you can see now it's very similar to this search bar here. We need to add this text here, which is a placeholder text. So you can see here we have placeholder and we have the text search for that. Let me put it to search for movie. And of course we can style that as we saw in the introduction. So to do that, we used this special selector. We will put the text and then we have double semicolon and then placeholder. So let's make this text smaller. And now we want to implement this outline here. So notice that when we click the select, it's only we have the outline here around the select. When we click around the search, we have the outline around the search here. And when we click inside the input, we have the outline surrounding the whole component here. The first thing you want to know is that when we click on the elements, they will be focused. So we'll be using the focus pseudo class. And let's start by this element here, the select, and we can use the name of the class, category select, and then the colon and focus. And when it's focused, we want to put an outline. So I have an outline which is solid, 2 pixels width, and this color. Let me save and click on this element, and you can see we already have the outline. However, you can notice that the right part of the outline is not shown, and that's because this input is drawn on top of it. So we want to tell the web browser to draw this element above the input. And to do that, we have a property called the Z index. So you can think of it as like a third dimension. And if we put it to something high, for example, 100, and now the outline is drawn even on top of the input. And now you can see that when we click the input, it already has an outline and it's drawn on top of the button. Let me remove the outline of the button because when we click on it, we want to draw the outline of the parent element, which is the div with the middle part class. So now in the search text, we want to put outline to none and save. So now when we click on it, it's focused, but there is no outline. We have an outline here, and still on this button, we don't have any outline. So let's put the outline for the button, similar to this one here. Let's copy those and go to the search button and use search button, focus, save. And now when we click on the button, it will be focused. Now you can see also that this language button is on top of our button. However, here I don't need to use the Z class because I want to have some space between these elements. I will add margin here, the middle part, to separate it from the left and from the right part. So we'll add margin right, maybe put it to 4 pixels, and same for margin left, and let's save. And now since we have some margin here, this outline will not intersect with this button. Now we want to outline the whole middle part when we click on the input. And to do that, we will be using the has selector as we show it in the introduction. Let me put it below the middle part because now we want to style the middle part. So we write the middle part and then we use this has selector, and inside the has selector we want to tell the web browser here to apply this style when the input child of this middle part is focused. So to do that, we use the child operator, then followed by a selector for the input. So we can use either an input, for example, because we have an input tag and we want to have it focused. And now let's put the style and save. And now you can see when I click here, the whole middle part is outlined. The same effect we can have it here, so we don't need to use the tag selector. So here we use the tag selector. We can use the class name, and this text box has a class name which is called search text. So now if I save, you can see that it still works. You can even use an ID here if you want. So we can, I don't know if we had an ID for this search text. Yeah, it has an ID. It's also called search text. So now we can use an ID selector and save, and now you can see it still works. However, notice now that the outline have sharp corners here, and that's because the outline follows the border of the element, and now this style here is applied to the middle part. And in the middle part, as you can see here, we did not put a radius to the border. So let's do that, and let's put the radius to 4 pixels, similar to the category and the button. And we want this to be applied to all sides. And let's save, and now you can see when we click, we have a nice rounded corners here. And this is now look very similar to what we have here. Now let's move to the right part. Let's start by making the right part display to flex, and we use the default direction to row and align element to center. Then let us target all these 3 buttons. So as you can see here, we are using this comma operator, and let's put also the display here to flex, and now you can see since the default direction is row, everything now in a row. Let me write the flex direction and align of the items and change the border, font, and margin for these three buttons. So we removed all the borders and we used a smaller font, as you can see here. Now for the language image, let's make it shorter and wider. So we have the width to 24 pixels. Let me put in the height maybe to 16 pixels. And then let's start the language label. Let's use a bold font and bring it closer to the image. So we used now this negative margin here to bring the label closer to the image. And let's add some margin to the right button. Let's target now the user button. So remember now we have the styles here which are applied to the user button. So it's already a flex. However, the flex direction is row. In this button, we want the flex direction to be column. So we can put it here. And you can see now we have the two divs. I think we had two divs here. They are on top of each other. So now we want these two buttons to be left aligned and maybe add a border here, a small border to the left. So let's put the border left for the button to solid with 1 pixel width. And now let's target the text inside. So as you can see here, we have the text, which is a div. So we will use the child selector. So since those divs are inside a class called user button, so we start by the parent class, which is user button, and then we add a white space and then write the child selector. And here we will be targeting the div tag directly. And let's put the background color first to red and let's save. And now you can see that both divs has a red background because they are targeted by this style here. Let me make them take the whole width here. So to do that, we can use the width property, and instead of using a pixel here, I will put it to 100%, and that means take the whole width of the parent element. And let's save. Now you can see that both divs extend to 100 here. And now we want the text inside these divs to be left aligned, and we can use then the text align property and put it to left. And now we have them left aligned here. And let us add a little bit of margin to the left. And let me now remove this background color and save. Now this looks a little bit different than here. However, let me make also the second line here to be bold. Notice that for these two divs here, we did not add any class or ID. Of course, we can do that and target it, but we want to practice combining of selectors. So let's style these two divs using the combining selectors. Let's make this second div here to be bold. So if we put font weight to bolder and save, you can see that both of them now are bold, not one of them. We want only to target the second one, and you can do that by applying the parent. So we have user button. This will be selecting our tag with the user button class, then div, so which has a child called div, and then I will use the sibling div. So now we need a div which is preceded by a div, and they are both inside a user button class. And now let's put maybe the background here to red to see that and save. Now you can see that only the second div here is selected because the first div is not preceded by a div. And now let me remove this background color and put here the font weight to bolder and save. And now let's style the film image. So let me first make it maybe a little bit smaller and then target the number. So first we want to change the color here. And for this number, we already added an ID called num. We can also target it using the class film div, but let us do that using this ID selector here and save. Now you can see the color has changed, and we want to change the position of this color. We will not put it here in the middle as in this website, but maybe to the upper right corner. And now since the user button is a flex, we can do that using this margin left, put it to a minus value. Now it's in top of this image, and let's also drag it to the top. Let's make also the font size larger and give it also some font weight. Maybe it's too close to the image. Let me make this smaller and maybe make it a little bit higher. Now it looks better. And now you can see we have styles which are not exactly like this, but they are very similar, I would say. You can see here we have an outline when you move over all the elements, but you can see also that when we move, the elements are adjusting their location. So which is not very nice, and that's because I think here they are using the border property. So I will use the outline property instead of that to add this border here. And I will target this using the mouse hover selector. So let's start by the logo button. I will add this here at the bottom. So we have the logo button, and I will select when we hover over it using a colon, then hover. And here, if we used maybe border, we can put it to solid. I will put it to 3 pixels just to see if we can get this flickering effect, and we'll put the color to white. So when the mouse is over the logo button, the border appears, and because this border is taking 3 pixels from this side, 3 from the other, so those are 6 pixels, and the other elements are pushed. So to avoid that, let me use an outline, and now you can see we get a border. Yeah, we get a border, but it's covered by the other button. We will solve that by adding more space later. So let me first make the border to 1 pixel only, and let us add a radius to it. And let's change also the cursor to pointer. So now notice over this button, the cursor is not changed, but here now it's a pointer. So let me add a margin to the right, save. Now we can see this outline. However, for this evaluate, maybe I will push it to the up a little bit. So let's go to the logo span, and let's make this smaller, maybe 14, and too much, maybe 16. So now we have a good selection, and it does not flicker, as you can see. Let us do the same for the other buttons. So we can do that by combining those selectors. So let's add the location button, hover, and then the language button, and then the user button, and the film button. Now we can save, and you can see we have a border here, a border here, same here. So it's working well, I would say. So we need also to have a pointer when we hover over these two. So we need also to change the styles when we hover over the select and the button here. So let's do that. So we need the search button hover, and let me put it below the search button. And for that, we make the background a little bit darker, as we saw in the website. And for the category select, we make the background lighter. And let's try it. So now you can see it's lighter. Here is darker, but we need also to put the cursor to pointer, so we can actually do that either here in the hover, or same effect you will get it if we put it here. Same for the button. So now we have lighter color, and the pointer same here. And finally, let me show you now the before and after selector. Okay, and let's do that for this paragraph, and let's give it a style. Let's give it a class. Let's call it test. And you can see here, this is paragraph 1. So if we targeted test and set background color red, now this test paragraph is changed. And let's try the before selector. And as you can see, we can have content here. And let's put some content here. Maybe this is content from CSS, and save. And you can see now we have this content here before, and we can even style it. So as you can see here, we have the background color to green. Same also for the content after. You can see it here. Let me comment those because I did them only to show you the before and after, and save. And that's all what I wanted to show in this video. If you enjoyed, please give it a thumb up and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next videos. Bye.